Hi guys, and welcome back to another video. So today we are going to be working in my sketchbook as it is Monday. Now today's video is going to be on the shorter side just because I kind of ran out of time wanting to be able to split up the video footage into bite-sized pieces for the session. I was planning to do this one more real time, but because I ran out of time, I decided to kick it into time lapse for the entire painting session. But let's prep my paper first. So I decided that I kind of wanted to give my little spread a little bit of a border here. One is because I just like the look and it kind of makes things look a little bit more finished, but as well as that when I'm painting, I'm not trying to meet the edges completely. And the reason why I don't want to do that is actually because I want to keep my sketchbook a little bit more on the cleaner side. I didn't want to accidentally run the gouache paint all the way across the edge and touching the cover and all that jazz, or miscellaneous pages. So I'm just taping off the edges so I kind of know where to keep my brush to stop from running off the page. So in terms of who I'm drawing, if you missed last Saturday's video, I really want to draw more Ensemble Stars fan art in general, and certain characters like Tsukasa, who I am going to be painting today, as well as Hiro. There's a few other people I would like to draw digitally, or just draw a little bit more and sketch a little bit more, just because I think in general I like their character designs. A lot of them have really cool outfits from if you just look at their cards and stuff, I really like them. So I'll probably be sprinkling some more Ensemble Stars fan art here and there. But yeah, because I didn't really have time to work on these ones, I actually had 2 sketches done, and you can see both of them are incomplete. The one on the left you can barely see just because there is bleed through from alcohol marker, and the one on the right is kind of just an incomplete sketch. So yeah, I'm going to go through a little bit of the sketching portion so you can kind of flesh out what I want these ones to look like. And I am going to be painting these with gouache, and the reason being is that I want to cover up that marker bleed through. I think in my previous sketchbook, literally the one just before this one, I've been a little bit lazy in terms of how I cover up my bleed through. So I try to make it a goal for myself to use all pages of my sketchbook. So even if there's bleed through, I would like to usually cover it up by painting over it with gouache. But I think more recently I've either been using sticky notes to do thumbnailing and sticking it everywhere on the back of bleed through pages, or I've been taking separate cardstock, doing an illustration and just putting it on top instead of taking time to paint, just because I'm a little bit slower when it comes to painting with gouache, and I'm a little bit more particular. But for this particular spread, so you can see that I've kind of didn't want to do the sketch in red this time, or pink, which I usually do whenever I'm doing a painting, but because it's harder to see my pencil marks behind the, or on top of the bleed through, I decided to just go with graphite. And I think maybe moving forward I'll just continue this. I don't think it's too bothersome anymore to always use the red pencil, unless I do feel really lazy, then maybe I'll do that if I don't want to have to cover up the entire surface with paint, just because sometimes the dark graphite kind of shows through a little bit more than the Color ENO that I use, or the Pirsmacolor Premiers, or not Premiers, Scholars. Nope, not Scholars. Pirsmacolor Col-Eraser pencils. But for the painting portion, so I decided to obviously use watercolor as usual to kind of prime the paper, as well as just to give the general idea of how I wanted to do the lighting and just general color. So I've done that, and then after when it's done drying, I will go ahead and go in with the HIMI MIYA jelly gouache. And I've been using this gouache for a while, but every time I take a significant break, which that's not exactly a significant amount of time for a break, but anything maybe a week or 2, I feel rusty using the paint every time. So did feel a little bit rusty, which is kind of why I wanted to make sure that the first drawing or painting that I do is the larger one, so that I don't have to worry about details, because you'll see when I start doing the line work for the face and stuff, sometimes I get a little bit too blotchy and the lines get a little bit too thick. But yeah, I just had a lot of fun painting Tsukasa for the most part. I kind of just wanted to play with around like with the bright color of his hair. I don't draw a lot of people with red hair. Like, I think the only one I've drawn recently is probably Diluc or Nilou from Genshin Impact. And I don't know, something about trying to get that vibrant red to really stand out with traditional medium is something like I really want to practice a little bit more. Sometimes I feel like I don't get that really vibrant red, and when I add shadows or highlights or anything like that, I have a hard time making it still like feel like it's vibrant enough. I don't know if shifting it to yellow for the highlights is always a good idea, but it works for the most part. I don't like using the stark white for the highlights all the time, especially if the light's not too intense. And then whenever I'm doing shadows for red objects or like red hair or anything like that, I like to push purples, and I try to add a little bit of like color variation by adding a little bit of like pale blues and pale purples into just kind of like little streaks across his hair, just so the hair doesn't look too boring in terms of like color temperature and just color hue. So when I was planning out the kind of color scheme or like lighting, because I would like to establish that prior to painting, just because if I don't, then I'll probably get more lost than I need to be. So I wanted to do the one on the left more kind of like performance-ish kind of lighting, or like, you know, he's on stage, but I decided that maybe I didn't want to cover the entirety of the page with gouache, just because there might be a little bit more cracking, or just because I feel like maybe I'll get too bogged down by trying to cover the entire surface, or trying to keep my shapes of like either his hair or his outfit, or depending on the order I decide to paint in, like I'll try to my best to kind of keep one or the other more pristine. And maybe to take off the pressure, I decided to not really paint the background. So you saw me do like a quick wash of watercolor on the background, and I kind of made it more of like a hazier color, and I think it makes it a little bit easier to hide the fact there was a little bit of marker bleed through without having to cover the entirety of the page with gouache. For the most part, where Suo, I keep calling him Suo, his name is Tsukasa. So Tsukasa's face and body kind of covers up the majority of the bleed through from Masaki, but there's a little bit of brown peeking through from where Masaki's hair is on the other side, and you can see like little hints of it here and there, but I think the cloudiness kind of ties it in a little bit better, so that it doesn't really look like another figure is like behind Tsukasa. So now I'm doing kind of like simple line work. I was having a hard time getting the right consistency to allow myself to have thinner lines. Sometimes I have like a good day of doing it, and sometimes I have a bad day, but yeah, kind of a hard time doing that. Also for this one, I tried my best to make sure that he's in the focus, and I try to make him look like it's sharing the same light source as the one on the left. So I have the light coming from the kind of like in between them both. So this one has the light coming from the left side, and then the left Tsukasa has it coming from the right side. So because I didn't want to show just like empty desk on the right side of my sketchbook, I decided to put my palette a little bit closer so you guys can see a little bit of the mixing. I still haven't found like a good way of being able to show you guys like how I mix colors, because I don't think I mix colors very proficiently in terms of mixing paints. I kind of do a lot of like trial and error, so you just add like a little bit of color to each of my wells and then kind of adjust and see how things look and how things work, because you can see like as I move like across his hair color, I'm adding more purples and blues, and then sometimes I'm adding lighter color as I'm going back the other way, and I'm still using that same pool of color on my palette, which probably isn't good if you don't want like your colors to really be contaminated, or if you want to keep the vibrancy without making it look too muted by adding too many colors with each other. But in terms of how much I like these, so for the most part I actually really like both of them, and I think they look cute together on a spread like this. I definitely think this one had a little bit of struggling for the face, especially the eyes. I don't know if it's because like the way I sketched it, I didn't know which way he was gonna be looking. I didn't know if he wanted, like, if I wanted him to be looking at the viewer, like straight ahead at, like, towards us, or if he's gonna be looking off to the side. I kind of make him, what am I trying to say? I feel like I'm lacking so much sleep lately. Like the grammar and the way I'm speaking is absolutely terrible. So excuse that. Where was I talking about? Yes, like the way he's looking, I made him look to the left, and for the most part, I think my sketch was like trying to make him look towards us, so there's a bit of a confusion, but I did like the color palette or the lighting, how soft it was that I had it in the watercolor phase, and I tried my best to keep that. I think I didn't do too bad of a job. I do like the little bit more I don't know if it's cell shady, but it's a little bit more chunkier and just relying on the shadows of like the shapes for the shadows rather than trying to keep too many indication of like individual strands and stuff of the hair, just because it kind of looks a little bit, I don't know how to explain it. I just like the more chunkier geometric kind of shapes from the hair that's kind of like subtly hinted, especially mostly on his right side, just because it is in shadow. There's a little bit less definition with like lack of highlight and stuff, so I just really like the more flat look in a sense. I don't know if I'm making any sense at this point, because I swear my sleep schedule has been so off. I'm gonna try my best to see how much I can film in the next few days, because I would like to take the holidays off for the most part, but I don't want to stop the uploads just because like I personally like watching videos and stuff during the holidays too. It just feels a little bit more cozy, so I would like to have that for you guys as well. But it might mean that I will have less streams, so I can take some time to film. But here are the two little paintings in the sketchbook, both of Tsukasa Suo from Ensemble Stars. And yeah, just kind of me wanting to really paint somebody with red hair, and he's one of my favorite characters, so yeah, just wanted to paint him. I'm just going to be removing the tape, and you guys can see for the most part it's a clean border all the way around. And like I said, if I'm painting like the background a little bit, I would like to have the border be there, so it kind of stops me from painting over the edge and like painting over kind of like the seam or the cover of the sketchbook itself. But I think that's all from me. I'll show you guys like a little bit of a full overview of the spread, and then I'll get going. So yeah, I think that's about it. I'll talk to you guys next time in the next video. Bye!